We were talking about thinkism, which is a great term. This idea that we can think the future, we can know exactly what it's going to look like in very narrow strokes, and then we can anticipate what's going to happen.
Right,
And you give a great tidbit about the Amish. And the
right.
Amish, what they do when a new technology is introduced is they ask two questions before they adopt it. The first one is, will this technology strengthen my family? And will this technology strengthen our community? And I love this idea that they have these early adopters where
Yeah.
certain people will go and they'll adopt a technology for the community and they'll do it for, say, 1 year. And then the rest of the community will observe what happens to these people. Do they become more socially isolated? Do they become more anxious? Or do they become kinder? Do they become more generous to the community? And then, rather than grand architect thinkism, they look at what happens, they run their own kind of scientific experiment for the community, and only then, only once the results are in, do they make the decision to adopt or to reject that technology.
Yeah, that's a very good summary. And it's sort of evidence-based technological policy, which is what I advocate for. Rather than basing our policy on what we could imagine could happen, let's base it on what actually does happen. Let's take the evidence. Okay? So let's take the evidence of social media and use that, the actual scholarly scientific evidence, rather than all the things that we could imagine could happen. And the Amish do that in that kind of very ad hoc way. They never actually make a real decision, and most of those decisions are at the parish community level, one by one. But yeah, they will allow an Amish early adopter to try out something, always with the caveat that if they observe negative effects, he has to surrender that immediately, and that's the deal that they make. So, and bit by bit, basically what the Amish are is they're very late adopters. They're in the process right now of accepting cell phones, but not smartphones. And cell phones for a number of reasons. Even though they don't have phones or wires, telephones, they were accepting cell phones as appropriate for their life. Solar recharged, all that kind of stuff. By people observing the people who were early adopters using them, who often began by using them at work first. That was often an excuse they use and they almost kind of like the Orthodox Jew have some really weird workarounds. So they have this distinction between using something and owning it. So they will often be driven to places they need to go by people who have vans who drive the Amish around. That's their job. They're regular people. They're like Uber drivers. They have vans and they only ferry Amish. And the Amish will ride in the car happily, but they don't own the car. So, and there is some distinction between owning and access, which I talk about as well. Access is a superior than ownership in many ways. But the Amish do use an evidence-based idea on let's look at how it does. And then the criteria that the Amish use, which you talked about, is true. And it may not be different than individuals, but the main difference that the Amish have is that they have a community criteria. They have a collective criteria. Most people that I've met, and I'm sure you included and me included, will use certain technologies and not others. We don't have TV in our house. Someone else may not have, a dryer or, whatever it is. But the difference is that I make those as an individual, or we have an individual family. The thing about the Amish, which is unusual, is they have a collective criteria. And so that's in this individual culture we have of typical modern Americans, that's a huge difference. And that gives them some power because they're much more collectivistic than individualistic modern Americans.